I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Doni and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
my head up.
I'm from South Carolina, so I just
Doni.
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Mars?
Oh, my heart,
Happy 20th anniversary.
my heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? Doni.
and dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's
The doctor lived next door to the janitor, to the reverend, and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Doni, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it for all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Doni, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. And we have a very special interview today. Good morning, Mr. Darius Hall. And as I bring up our guest, I'm going to play a clip by former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. About 9 years ago, I was invited out to the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Actually, they hired me to speak to the member newspapers, over 100 of them, about how Be More News has been able to survive and thrive over the past 20, now 21 years. So first, let me bring up our guest. Good morning, Senator. How are you today?
Doni, always glad to be here with you, brother.
Okay, I have something that I want you to listen to by former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown.
And Speaker.
And Speaker of the House of California. You know, as I see the clip, it's not going to be loud enough. But in essence, 9 years ago, Speaker Brown spoke about the need to celebrate the black press. And if you go to my YouTube channel and type in Willie Brown, one can pull it up from 9 years ago. And I don't think the audio is going to be loud enough. But he speaks. Now, this is the most, to my knowledge, my dad first taught me about him. He's the most accomplished black, good morning, Donald Askew, the most accomplished black politician that I look up to out there on the West Coast. Of course, he helped mentor the vice president and did so many other things. I mean, just to be a black mayor of San Francisco, when you look at the racial demographics out there. So my question to you with that backdrop is, why are you so supportive of the black press?
I think it's important to support the black press, and just in reference to community. As you look at our history was told through our papers, our newspapers, books, op-eds that were written to kind of elevate our future and what was going on within our community, Doni. And that's why no matter what, how many times you reach out, if I got it, it's always there, because it's super important.
Okay, I have two quotes I want to bounce off of you. I want to know your thoughts on these.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Your thoughts?
Well, when they were writing that Declaration of Independence, it wasn't for Black people at that moment. But I think that as we evolve, that's what everybody's seeking, that pursuit of happiness. How do you make and contribute service to your community? How do you make and ensure that your family have the needs and be able to thrive from that standpoint? And how do you make sure that from a greater good that you're lifting people? So that's what I see it as at that moment. And that's what I try to exhibit the behavior at this time. But we know at that time that it wasn't written for us.
Okay, now this one here, and this is the final piece. School is over after this. I'm going to let you do your thing. But this is a quote that I know you love. It's by William Clay. And I think other people have used it. So my understanding is that it's by William Clay.
Mm-hmm.
This is quite a game, politics. There are no permanent enemies and no permanent friends. Only permanent interests. What does that mean to you?
That teaches me growth as a person, Donnie. I think that, as you know, we're both born and raised in the city of Baltimore, and in the city of Baltimore, it teaches you in different ways. So before getting into politics, the best way to use the tools that you had in the toolbox was your hands and things of that nature. But the reality is in politics, people don't throw hands. They just pick up a pen and write a signature. And that may impact your job. That may impact appropriation. That may impact everything. So the biggest tool that you realize that you have is your mind. And how do you use your mind to leverage and stretch to be able to leverage these things for your community in the best way? So mine's is, as I grow older, I don't got time to like entertain a lot of the negative energy. Mine's is, how do I move forward? How do I stay focused? How do I stay disciplined? And whoever I'm working with that has a common goal to achieve those types of things is what I'm trying my best to do for the community.
Senator, I see one of the biggest challenges in our community is fatherlessness. Any thoughts?
That's a big one for me, Donnie. I tell you again, I just feel like over the past 5 years, I've grown just as a human being. But I did a genealogy report for my mom's side and my father's side within the last 24, 36 months. And one of the things that I think about is, as soon as I did the genealogy report, I actually commissioned a couple portraits. I commissioned a portrait for my mom's side, which we had pictures of 6 generations of women. And I wanted my daughters to be able to wake up every day and see the folks that were before them. So every day in the living room. And I just got one back from a student over at Morgan who just did one for my father's side. And that's another group of women. We had the photos for at least 5 generations for my father's side. So that's in the dining room. So one of the things my wife said was, hey, Cory, you know, your sons don't always, you know, it's a lot of women, photos of women in here, but like, how are you going to reflect that back to your sons, having 2 daughters and 2 sons? And one of the things that I'm working on is it's just me and my sons in there. And I think that it's important to break that cycle. So if you do not have that leadership or that example at the moment in front of you, you should demonstrate how are you going to break that cycle? How are you going to lead by example? And I think this starts with myself and my 2 sons, which is one that we're going to be putting in the living room in a couple months. And I think that's important because I think about that every day. I had a whole bunch of women in my family and there wasn't a lot of male figures, but like we have a responsibility, a great responsibility, not just to wrap our arms around our sons, but all the sons within our neighborhood, in our neighborhoods, to make sure that they're going a direction and they have something to reflect on.
Now you've left me bewildered. You've left me perplexed. What about your dad, your granddad, your great granddad?
Some of the challenges that we have and we see during the genealogy report is that I can't get all the way back to my paternal side because some of it's a little bit unknown, or you know, there were challenges with those that preceded me, the where I don't always know that history can be as protective of that history also, which is why I keep saying we have to break that cycle.
I get it. You know, I was in Africa and while and you figure, okay, y'all right here, you know what went down. But just because people are in Africa doesn't mean that they know what was going on 2 or 3 generations behind them. On the other hand, you might meet people that can go back hundreds of years.
Yep.
But there are others who can't go back to last year.
That's so true.
You look
So
at
true.
the Hutus versus the Tutsis, and removing black and white. I'm talking about black and black.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you look at the Hutus and the Tutsis and the war that went down, well, damn, that was just as vicious as King Leopold of Belgium chopping off the hands of a whole tribe of people in the Congo.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been to Africa?
I've never been to Africa, Donnie. Unfortunately, and I'm gonna dig into a couple points that you said. So first, I just want to lift up Latoya Peoples was one of the people. She's a Baltimore artist. She's the one that painted the first one. And Alexandria Wingate, current graduate of Morgan this year, but she was the second did the second photo. So I just want to lift them up. 2 Black women that did phenomenal things. And as you stated in reference to like just knowing your history, my mom and my grandmother actually cried when they saw that photo, and my other family members, because they were like, I don't know why this wasn't done prior to this. Even the genealogy report, being able to share that with my cousins and things of this nature, said, hey, just hold on to this for your kids or things of that nature, so you can go back to the 1700s and know how this thing started and some of the names. And I had the fortunate opportunity to be able to talk with my grandmother, who's still living in her 80s, and start referencing some of the names that we were seeing and being able to make that connection. So like, it was just, it hit in a different way. But then I'll go back to like the Baltimore experience. Donnie, unfortunately, I was 25 before I ever got on an airplane. So like, I hadn't had the outside of going to Hershey Park or Donnie's Park, like that was a big deal. That was us going out of the state, and like that was the thing. But eventually, and I've only been out of the country twice thus far, but I look forward to going to Africa, because like our young folks unfortunately only know the neighborhoods that they grew up in. I was so familiar with the 4 blocks that I grew up in, West Baltimore, East Baltimore, that I didn't have the larger impact and understanding of like, this thing is so much bigger than Baltimore City. This thing is so much bigger than the state of Maryland. And I'm telling you, every time I go to another state or have the fortunate opportunity to be able to live, go through another country, I just feel like I grow as a human being, because you see things, you say, this is not the norm. What we're dealing with in this country is not the norm. I went to Switzerland, I saw them drinking out of water fountains on the streets, and we can't even drink water in our schools. So like these things, they condition you to think that this is a normal behavior, but that's not. And I think that the only way to be able to see those things is to expose yourself to things that are different.
Pop quiz.
Yes, sir.
What book are you reading right now?
So I just finished Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man, for the first time. I read a book on Lincoln and leadership, and I'm currently reading a book called The 1 Minute Millionaire.
Tell me about Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man.
I'm a big nonfiction, so I don't read a lot of fiction, and it was a powerful story in reference to just being able to, I want to say, think outside the box and be able to see things different. Everything that you believe that you see or think that you know, it could be different. And as you grow as a person, you be able to see it a little bit more clear.
Do you feel, have you ever felt invisible?
I think that I probably feel like I just started living probably in my 30s. Like when I say that, I'm saying like, what is life truly about? I'm in a fundamental space where I believe that life is truly about service. How do you serve people? How do you lift people up? Because I think that energy that you put out is the energy that you get back. And what happens is that you're working towards something that's bigger than you. As stated, like the last several years, I just think about legacy. And I think about like, what is the impact that we leave that's going to be bigger than the 40, 50, 80 years that we'd be able to spend here that they can talk about from a generation. So you see how I discuss things about the genealogy report, the portraits, but like even from a Coppin State University, just a couple weeks ago, Donnie, my wife is a graduate of Coppin State University. She actually got a full ride at Coppin State University. She was a McNair scholar. And
so was I.
Yep.
Ronald E. McNair.
Ronald E. McNair, for those that don't know.
Program.
So I went to the gala over at Coppin and I said to Dr. Jenkins, I said, how can I be of a bigger impact to this institution? Because you are a phenomenal leader and I can see his leadership. And Coppin hasn't had leadership in a while, Donnie. Like,
we've had intermittent leaders. When you think of Dr. Burnett, and
I think of Dr. Burnett, like that was solid, that was consistent, but we have not had consistent.
We had a whole bunch of stepdads since then.
So Dr. Jenkins has given me the feeling like I just feel real good about it. And the question I asked him, like, how can I be beneficial to this institution from that standpoint? And he said, well, I said, well, I'm gonna write a check. And then I got to thinking about like, how do you make that of importance? How do you make sure that keep going? And then I started to learn about endowments. So we ended up writing a big check. Me and my wife ended up writing a big check to make sure that not only was she a benefactor in a whole ride, and we're benefiting currently from the jewel that Coppin was able to give, how can we impact other lives of young folks that are in Baltimore City that are utilizing that institution? And that's one of the things that I think about, like I said, from a legacy standpoint.
One thing you can do is bring Dr. Jenkins out into the community. Now, I grew up just 4 blocks south of Coppin, and when you think of Dr. Calvin Burnett, this is something many people don't know. Dr. Burnett would walk from Coppin State in the 2500 block of West North Avenue. He'd walk down to Pennsylvania Avenue, walk down Pennsylvania Avenue to the harbor, and he'd walk back every morning. Now, I know we're in the Instagram generation, but nothing beats good old-fashioned footwork.
No, I agree. So here's what I'll say. Last night, we did a scholarship award ceremony, myself, Delegate Addison, and Delegate Young. There were a couple hundred young people that we celebrated last night, their family members, our community leaders, and Dr. Jenkins was one of those 2 presidents that actually greeted the awardees last night.
Got to do more of that.
Yep.
Something else you could teach him is the significance of the Black press to historically Black colleges and universities. For instance, when he first came, it took him no time to do an interview with the Baltimore Sun. I studied media at Coppin State, 1993. That's where my journalist career began. So when it takes the Black media over a year to meet with the new Black president after several intermittent Black presidents, it leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth because you wonder just how connected this Black president is, especially considering who they had. Marie Thompson, they had
they had the gentleman from Anne Arundel Community College for a period. He was like an interim.
3 or 4, 5 different presidents in the midst. Let me share this with you. Now, I hate to bring up sour situations, but just before Dr. Jenkins got to Coppin, Kurt Schmoke wanted to combine Coppin, University of Baltimore, and Baltimore City Community College into one school where Kurt Schmoke would have been the chancellor. This was before Jenkins comes onto the scene, and there was no one but myself and Doc Cheatham, this is one time we agreed, that thwarted that effort. And not that he needs to know this history, but he needs to know that history of those unsung heroes who are out there fighting on the front lines. And so when the Black press has to wait a year to talk to this young man, it's something you don't kind of forget.
Man, I appreciate that feedback, and I hear it. I own it. One of the things that I'll say is that I do believe that Dr. Jenkins is a phenomenal leader, but I'll also make sure that I relay the message because it is important with the words that you spoke.
So what was the most significant piece of legislation for you in the 23 session?
The 23 session was another special session for me, is what I would say, Donnie. One of the things that I just want to reiterate is that I serve on the budget committee. I'm one of 13 members on the budget committee for the Maryland State Senate. So the most important piece of legislation to me was the budget document. I believe that the budget reflects your priorities. Some of the things that we were able to interject within the budget was a stadium's going to be built right there on Harford and 25th at Fairmont Harford. For folks that don't know, Reach Partnership is in there. Reach Partnership is the folks that were at the Lake Clifton campus. And that is going to be the first high school stadium right there on Harford and 25th. And Donnie, one of the things that I'm proud of is I got a last minute call during session. They said that they had a $2 million gap for that stadium that was to be built. It had been promised for several years, and they wanted to make sure that it get done. I said, I do not mind helping, assisting in what you all are pursuing, but I would like the name of the stadium to be after the first African-American senator for East Baltimore, who actually grew up in the Chum community, which is adjacent to that school. He actually started the Chum community back in the 70s, Senator Robert E. Dalton. So before Irby was Douglas, before Douglas was Dalton. So the stadium will be named after Senator Robert L. Dalton. And that's
a black man.
A black man, yes, sir.
Didn't know that.
So like that's major for me. The other one is that I preceded a great man, Senator Nathaniel McFadden, and right there in that Somerset footprint, we're doing a $6 million plus park. That's going to be named after him, the Nathaniel J. McFadden Learn and Play Park. Is super excited about that. But we also complemented that in this current budget document. Donnie, I have a great anchor, and it's a number of great anchors in East Baltimore. It's called the Mac Lewis Gym. And the Mac Lewis Gym had came to me last minute. They're in the Church Square facility, and they said they had just got purchased. There was a new owner, and they felt like they were going to be removed from the facility. And I told the folks over at Mac Lewis Gym, just hold tight. I don't like making promises, but I'm telling you, I'm working on it. So inside the budget document, and this was the first year that we've ever done operating dollars, and I only was able to do 2 operating appropriations, and one of them was the Mac Lewis Gym, to be able to help them to be able to facilitate for the rent so that they do not have to worry about this on a year-to-year basis, that they have that in a whole from a 10-year standpoint, and that they can focus on what they do best, which is wrapping their arms around our young people, teaching them boxing, teaching them reading and things of that nature, and providing a safe space. So I was super excited about that. Donnie, another one is that we don't have like healthy food options. I want to say food insecurity in a number of our neighborhoods. For folks that may not know the neighborhoods that I'm talking about Oliver, I'm talking about New Broadway East, I'm talking about Berea, I'm talking about Somerset. We don't have a supermarket opportunity, but one of the things is that I've had the fortunate and I'm blessed to be able to have good partners. So there's a gentleman by the name of Dan Henson. He has a daughter by the name of Dana Henson, and they're working in that Somerset footprint. And they came to us and they said, Cory, we're on the verge of being able to secure a supermarket, but we also need help.
I just want to say Daniel P. Henson III, the former housing commissioner.
Daniel P. Henson, the former housing commissioner. Yes, sir. So they came, they said that they needed help. So for the last 2 years in the budget document, you'll see something called the Somerset Grocery Store Initiative. And there's about 1.3 million allocated. The supermarket the deal has been inked. We're past the second quarter. They have the subsidy, and we're very, very close. It's been announced that we'll start some form of groundbreaking and recognition the end of this year, the first quarter of next year. And I'm super excited about that because that's one of the bigger goals when you're looking at the whole puzzle from that standpoint. I could go on and on and on what we did with that budget document, but I feel like we flipped it upside down, turned it inside out, and made sure that it was reflective of our priorities in East Baltimore from that standpoint.
Well, you mentioned boxing, so I got to come at you with a couple of uppercuts, because if I don't, they going to uppercut me when I go back to East Baltimore. I got to put in a plug. Here come the first uppercut.
All right.
For B. Gaddy,
yep.
The B. Gaddy Family Center. And then the other uppercut is for Leon Purnell and the Men's Center.
Yep.
For so much of my life, they mean everything to me, and you have spoken with them. I know you have, and I can't ever forget them because they are as real as it gets.
Yep.
But since you mentioned boxing,
you gotta let me lean on both of those too before you go to the next question.
Okay.
No, I'm super familiar with the work that's going on at the Men and Family Centers and Mr. Purnell. I look at him as like a mentor. Like before I even got in this game, he was there. And then with Miss Cynthia, the B. Gaddy's family, like I know the work that they're doing over there. We talk consistently, and I look forward to assisting them. Doni, I'm a big protector of those folks. Like it's like all these new friends, you have to remember the people that have been doing work in communities for decades on top of decades, because this thing didn't happen just on over nothing. It's people's shoulders that we stand on. And the two groups, the two folks, the two families that you mentioned are folks that have been doing work in East Baltimore since I was a child, from that standpoint. And another thing that I appreciate, and I think that it's important to protect history because folks will try to rewrite your own history. We have these shirts that we give out called Eastside Pride, and B. Gaddy is on one of those because we want to make sure that her story is told over and over and over again. And those young people that are coming up can ask the question, well, who was B. Gaddy? And then that gives us the opportunity to be able to once again tell that story, talk about what she did to feed folks, talk about her time in service during the city council and what she did in East Baltimore. So she's one of probably 20 or 25, and we've been coming out with different iterations where you see 4 or 5 of these strong leaders that have done something, served in some point in time to lift East Baltimore. But it's our responsibility to keep telling that story. I'm gonna stop right there and let you get to your next question.
Well, I'd love to get one of those. Are they available for? Are they for sale anywhere?
Yeah, we was giving them away last night, and I'll make sure that I hold one for you. I'll send you a couple pictures of different iterations, and you tell me which ones you want.
Well, I gotta say this: you and B. Gaddy have something in common politically. State Senator Cory McCray and former Baltimore City Councilwoman B. Gaddy have a similar story. When she ran for Baltimore City Council, nobody, nail one of the elected officials in East Baltimore supported her. And she whooped that hiney anyway.
Now you know what? Like that's one of the things.
You gotta touch it, but I'm telling you, and she whooped him, and it's a reminder. I know there's a system. She done the work. She could go up in any alley in East Baltimore, West Baltimore, downtown, and call people out by name. And it's a reminder, Senator, that just do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You do the work. You touch the people. You know, I'm all for organization, but some people you don't tell to go sit on the bench and wait 4 years. She wasn't that. You telling Jordan sit on the bench, and I think Jordan could do a lot more in terms of his philanthropy. But in terms of basketball, you gonna sit Jordan on the bench?
Yeah.
You gonna tell him wait 4 years? Come on, man.
There's a saying: you take care of the people take care of you. You take care of the streets take care of you. So I think that she just did a phenomenal job of she loved people. She loved on people, and she put people first. And I think that that's why people always had her back and continue to still have her back and have the organization's back.
At the B. Gaddy Thanksgiving dinner, at my last visit, I saw more white people in the line than black people. I've seen white volunteers bring in food. I've seen people bring in food from up and down the East Coast. B. Gaddy was a patron saint. It was way beyond race.
Mm-hmm.
From the people who benefited to the people who donated. It was far beyond race. It is the most beautiful thing that come out of this city, which is known for Mayor J. Barry Mahul, 1907 and 1911, who was the father of segregation. Baltimore is the home of segregation and of apartheid in America. I got a quiz for you. Pop quiz. Did you know that black people lived in Cross Keys in the 1800s?
I wasn't aware of that, no.
But you do know that Roland Park was the first suburban garden community.
I do know that much.
And an adjacent community to it is Ho's Heights, founded by Grandison Ho. And recently the mayor had to undo some efforts by Roland Park to cut Ho's Heights community, which is mostly black, but there are white people who live there. The Roland Park people wanted to cut off their access road to Roland Avenue. All of that to say, the fight that we face simply because of the color of our skin is not over. It happened this year again. How do we deal with racism in this city known as the home of segregation?
Now, I'm a firm believer that there are a couple ways that, let's just say there are 3 ways that you can help to alleviate and change the trajectory of our communities. I think about education plays a large part in that, and our educational institutions. I also look at generational wealth and how do you create wealth? How do you build wealth? And let's talk about wealth and show people about wealth. But the other piece is policy, and like the folks that have the roles, the arbitrary barriers that have been put in place in writing, in statute from that standpoint. And that's why I feel as though it's our responsibility to remove every arbitrary barrier that's there, because they're still documented and we're still removing them from that standpoint.
What politician inspired you to go into politics?
Doni, that's a tough one. I'll say some of the ones that I enjoy. I think that
no, the first one that you saw, you like, damn, I can do that.
I'll say Willie Brown was a good one. I'll say Maynard Jackson was a good one. I'll say Harold Washington was a good one.
Okay, let me be more specific.
Yep.
In Baltimore, who in Baltimore inspired you? The first one, the first politician, you're like that. For me, the first politician I saw up close was Perrin Mitchell and Arthur Murphy. And I was a little boy. My daddy took me to a fundraiser at Mondawmin. Now, this is what I knew, that there were politicians at this event, fundraiser, and there were gangsters there too. I'm just telling you what I saw as a little boy. But everybody worked together. Everybody knew their role.
Yep.
Okay, so how about this? What was your first political event that you went to?
What was my first political event that I went to?
That's a stall tactic. Come on now.
It probably was something for maybe, let's say Senator McFadden. Let's say Senator McFadden.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love how you lift him up. I love that.
That's my guy.
Because like there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And also the man, oh my God. I know you saw the interviews I did with him, and he pays homage to you too. Don't think I let him slide.
That's my guy. That's my guy.
Don't think I let him slide. But I am proud that 2 black men of different generations keep that continuum going. And you've set a precedent. You've set a precedent that must be replicated, just like segregation is replicated. We have to replicate that black love, period.
Now, Doni, I tell you, just by learning and just by reading, I just watch how other cultures protect their history. And I know that I have a responsibility. And I know that if you're going to serve in leaders have to lead. You have to lead from the front. And I think that one of the things is lifting the folks that preceded me. I definitely want to lean in. My man, LY. So I met LY probably while I was in elected office, and definitely Congressman Elijah Cummings. One of the things that I can remember is being in the apprenticeship and him giving me one of my first opportunities to be able to speak. So I wasn't a good speaker, or I wouldn't say that, but that wasn't something that I was familiar with. It wasn't my ministry. But being able to speak in front of a crowd, to be able to speak about the apprenticeship experience, I can remember that and still have pictures from that and embrace that piece of it.
Well, I'm not a politician, so I ain't got to kiss up to none of them. I'm going to say this to you.
What's that?
I want to know who's the next Cory McCray, because what I've seen with a lot of our people, not just in politics, but in academia, in our HBCUs, in our churches, in our national civil rights organizations with local chapters, in our national Black empowerment organizations with local chapters. I don't see who's the next. Like if you ask me who's the next Donnie Glover, I can point to Hassan Giordano. I can point to Catalina Bird, even though we didn't have knockdown, drag out fights. I can point to Marvin. What's his name? Marvin. Anyway, if we don't pass the ball, if we don't create the next one of us, because some of these cats, I can name names. Who did they pass the ball to? Because it looked like to me they still shooting. They ain't never passed the damn ball.
Yeah,
who's the next Cory McCray?
Donnie, as I read and I think about
United States family.
Yep. As I read and I think about leadership, I think that you are right. That's the real test of leadership. I think that you should be thinking about the exit as you even start from that standpoint and working your way backwards. So I think consistently each and every day about like who's next up, not being in this position forever from that standpoint. And how I try to do that is just by leading by example and showing them, having those moments to be able to say, hey, here's the leadership that I would like to exhibit. Some of the folks that I think that model those types of things, they're in my generation, but like I look at Antonio Hayes, I look at Charles Sidnall, like Malcolm Augustine, like those are brothers that I know are moving at the same capacity. The mission is the same, the love is the same, and things of that nature. I also think about like Melanie Griffith over there in Prince George is one of my favorite, because it's just like being intentional from that standpoint. But let me be clear, I'm trying my best to cultivate, develop this next generation of leaders. I think you do it not by talking about it, but by doing, by showing them what does it look like from that standpoint, pointing to them and also just letting them know the history too, because a lot of these folks that are getting in politics cannot tell you about Baltimore history. They wouldn't be able to speak about Perrin Mitchell. They wouldn't be able to speak about Clarence Mitchell. They wouldn't be able to speak about so many folks that have preceded us. And that's why I keep saying the folks that preceded me. I say before McFadden was a Irby, before Irby was a Douglas, before Douglas was a Dalton, so that they can have that history and keep telling that story. But let me be clear that I am working about that. I think about that every day because, like I said, you can do all these things, but if you do not have the consistency to be able to keep it going, then you failed as a leader from that standpoint. So I think about who's next up and who takes that torch and keep this thing going.
So the young man's name was Bobby Marvin. And
then Bobby Marvin, yep.
Stephanie Henderson. Matter of fact, Bobby Marvin said he gonna play Donnie Glover in a movie if they ever do a movie about me.
No, that's my guy.
But he gonna have to do a couple sit-ups anyway. But he's really brilliant. He's really brilliant, creative, and I'm not trying to help somebody be me. Mm-hmm. Help them be them. Mm-hmm. Help them to be the best that they can be.
Because we all unique. We all got gifts.
So you mentioned boxing. Did you watch the fight Saturday?
I didn't watch the fight Saturday. I got back Sunday, man. I was 8 days in Israel, and it was definitely another life-changing experience. So I didn't get to see the fight.
How so?
One of the things is being able to see a number of the places, you know, be able to walk the old Jerusalem, go to Tel Aviv, go to the Gaza Strip, go to the Syrian border. And one of the things that I got to see, Donnie, and like I don't feel uncomfortable in a lot of spaces, but there were moments where I did feel uncomfortable, and I'll talk about one. A kibbutz is like where a community of families live that work for one common goal. And we're on the Gaza Strip, and the woman is speaking to the rockets that are being launched on her community, and she's showing us what 4 of these rockets look like. And then I look around and I see all these different bomb shelters, Donnie, and she explains and articulates that you have 15 seconds to get to that bomb shelter when that siren goes off and that rocket is coming that way. And sometimes, you know, you may have to make the decision if you got 2 children, which child do you pick up to take to that bomb shelter with you? And when you think about this thing, you think like, man, I know life is short, but when you see it, I just felt super uncomfortable being that close to danger. at that moment. And I thought about all the things back home and how I could be doing more from that standpoint, because there are folks that are living under conditions that I'm not living under, and we have a responsibility. So it just made me think about my greater responsibility. It made me think about like what's going on in the other countries, because I've always been focused and laser focused on like Baltimore and how do I live Baltimore from that standpoint. But it also talked, like I saw how other communities protect their history. And that made me even want to double down, triple down in reference to like, what am I doing to protect the history, our history? Am I doing enough to protect our history from that standpoint? Because there are people that are going above and beyond. The other piece was that like in their country, once you turn 18 years old, you go and serve. And like service means a lot from that standpoint, because they're immediately serving their country as soon as they graduate from high school. So I think about like the level of service that I'm giving. Am I giving enough? Am I challenging myself enough? And am I truly being the best person? And that's some of the things that I keep reiterating as I've got back home. I tell you, every day that I've been back home for about 5 days now, Donnie. And I play this one song. It was by Nipsey Hussle, man. Just go and listen to this one. It's called Bigger Than Life. And I listened to Bigger Than Life a couple times, but it just didn't hit the same way that it hit. And I was like, man, this guy was so much, he was so futuristic because he's laying it down. And I was like, Cory, this is your story. This is that moment. Like, you got to own it. You got to take advantage of it. And it's so much bigger than you. It's bigger than your life, because you're thinking about what does the legacy look like.
Well, Bud Crawford won the fight, but he came out on Eminem's. And I always forget the name.
Lose yourself. Everybody talked about it.
But what was even greater was his humility. Now, I've been to Israel before. I was in Jordan back in 2002 as the U.S. troops were landing to invade Iraq. As a matter of fact, during my 10 days there, Yasser Arafat's compound was bombarded.
Wow.
And I went to a Palestinian refugee camp. They have been called the Black people of the Middle East. And I sat with this Palestinian inside the Palestinian refugee camp, and he was telling me about 1945, before their land was taken from them. All of that to say there is a history in that area. We know that Israel gets more foreign aid than all of the other countries in the Middle East combined. We know that besides the United Kingdom, Israel is one of America's staunchest allies. But let me just walk it back a bit, because this is something still got 17 minutes. America has 5% of the world's population. Barack Obama even spoke about this. We have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's inmates. Nearly half of the people in prison in America look like you and I. And Black women are the fastest growing demographic. The United Kingdom, Great Britain, is the only other country that incarcerates Black people to such a high rate. And they are America's #1 ally. Any thoughts on reverse, and especially given City Jail, Maryland State Penitentiary, the Fishbowl, Diagnostics, Supermax, these prisons that take up a swath of land up and down Greenmount, from Old Town Mall up to Eager Street, that our young people, our young men, they see it day in, day out. They feel it. Grandfather, father, son, multiple generations incarcerated. Senator, how do we reverse this downward spiral that's eating us from the inside, even to the first question I posed about fatherlessness?
So, Donnie, the challenge that I have is that you do like 3 or 4 questions in one, and I'd be happy to remember every last one of them. So
how do we get back on track? I mean,
I got you.
It's a mission. There's an assault against Black people, and you mentioned the bombs in Israel. Damn it, you live in Baltimore. They're killing more people in Baltimore than anywhere else in the world.
You're absolutely right. Well, you're absolutely right in
want to know
reference to
how
like the
you
safety
survive.
of Baltimore and the safety of Israel from that standpoint. But no, I do want to lean in and talk about some of the things that you said, comment on some of the things. Like we were able to visit the PLO and be able to see how the Pakistani government works from that standpoint. I met this dope young lady, Asanta, where she was an Ethiopian Jew, 2% of the population over in Israel, and like her personality was so big, but she was also, it was so important to be able to tell her story in reference to the Black Jews.
The fallacious.
Yep, that
were not embraced.
Yep, from that standpoint. The other piece that I just want to lean in on is like the Justice Reinvestment Act and what we have been doing from the state of Maryland to decrease the amount of folks that are incarcerated within our facility. We did that in 2016, and I think that the numbers show. Is there more that we can do? It's always more that we can do. But you asked the question, like, what is it that we can be doing to shift the trajectory of our neighborhoods? I think that it starts with home. So one of the things that I start with is try my best to raise the best human beings that I possibly can with Kennedy, Reagan, CJ, and Bryson. So it starts there. Doni, me and my wife are thoroughly engaged in there. What does their education look like? So they're doing very, very well in our Baltimore City public schools, but they're doing that because they have parents that complement and make sure that they get the tutoring that's necessary even after they go to school. They're playing a number of sports that helps them to deliver the confidence and things that's necessary to ensure that they know they can thrive in everything that they're doing. They're cultivating and building the relationships, whether it's in school, whether it's in tutoring, whether it's in sports. But the question is, how do we have those opportunities for all of our young scholars from that standpoint? And I think that we shift the trajectory by keep talking about wealth. So those folks that need to understand, and how do we build businesses, Black businesses, community businesses that help empower our folks. The second thing that I think that we do that through is to make sure that we have strong educational institutions and making sure that we're investing in these educational institutions from that standpoint. But policy plays a large role in making sure that we are thinking about who are the next leaders that are coming in and embracing them and showing them as much as possible is some of the things that I do. Doni, I keep saying it, like we can talk about it, but I think that the actions that have been delivered and exhibited over the past 9 years is the blueprint to how we shift those types of things. And I'm thinking, and I tell you, I continuously grow as a person, and I realize that we all need mentors. So that's why I check in with you. But I think that some of the things that you do is that you continue to make sure that I'm versed and I have an understanding of the historic standpoint. I look at a Joe Haskins and how he makes sure that he speaks to the wealth, the banking, that part of it. I look at a Theo Rogers and he thinks about like the development and cultivation of relationships. And he also thinks about from an educational standpoint. I think about so many folks that have I've been blessed to be able to have the mentorship of, whether it's Kurt Smoke, who was also there last night, being able to speak to you all once, twice, 3 times a year to be able to have a different understanding. So that's what I can do. I reached out to a brother at like 8:30. He came to it, but like Stanley West. And when you think about the future, he's a brother that I'm proud of, Doni. I met Stanley just a year ago in Annapolis, just a group of folks, young men, young Black men that had visited me. And what this young man did was he said, well, he talked about reading. I said, man, I'm an avid reader. And I gave him a book called Black Fortunes. And from Black Fortunes, he ended up starting a group that was it was like it mimicked the name, but it was these 7th and 8th graders that he was working with. So I reached out to Stanley West this morning. I said, Stanley, I ain't talked to you in a while. Let's chop it up and let's get lunch, because that's the same type of stuff that you all do. Just check in, make sure it's going the right thing, but just exhibiting the behavior that's necessary, because they're going to do what needs to be done once they see it from that standpoint. So I think that that's how we change and shift. Just be leaders and be the best leaders that we can be.
Yesterday, I interviewed this young man. He's from Baltimore. He's an award-winning CNN journalist. More than I imagined, it's what a Black man discovered about the white mother he never knew. Mm-hmm. Now, I went to school with him, but more so his brother. His brother was in my class. And they had a white mom. And so that's just to share with you what I've been reading on lately. Mm-hmm. With about 10 minutes, anything that we haven't discussed that you want to touch on? I mean, I got more questions, but I want to make sure you get a chance to, well, you know, what else has been on your mind? What's next? What's coming up?
I want to lean in because I think that it's important for people to understand, like, what's our way of thinking? How are we setting up the blueprint? How are we passing the torch? So some of the things that I've been able to do during my short tenure in the Maryland State Senate is, like, a lot of our communities don't always have master plans, or how do you think about the future, not from a 1 year to year scope, but like, what is it that we see 10 years, 15 years? So I just like to go through some of the neighborhoods and let you all know, as the listeners, as the audience, like, what have we been doing in the community to set up that blueprint after I leave. So if you look at the starting at the top, when you work your way up, there were 2 schools that had been, one was evacuated from an emergency standpoint, Fairleigh Elementary over to Thurgood, and Northeast was closed. And these schools were promised to be redone and open back up over a decade ago. I just wanted to let folks know we've been able to secure the money. It's $60+ million. The groundbreaking for Fairleigh happened this year, and we're going to see that matriculate over the next 2 or 3 years, which is major, which is important. And then let's go down that Hoffer Road corridor, and you think about, like, the Lake Clifton campus and being able to set the foundation. I'm pretty sure that this won't happen during my tenure, but we've laid a strong foundation. We brought Morgan in. Morgan now has acquired that entire campus. We've secured money inside of the budget.
They got Lake Clifton?
They got Lake Clifton, the campus. And what we did was we started $5 million that was in the budget about 3 years ago, so that they can start the planning, the designing, where they're going to build, like, arboretum, so that Dr. Wilson talked about, like, when he does graduations, he can invite 2 or 3 people tickets. They want to invite as many people as you like, so they're going to build that. They also want to build alumni housing over there, so when folks that have graduated from Morgan want to come in and things of that nature, that they have a space that's centric to the campus, that they can get quick access from that piece of it. So that's one of the things that I hope that 10 years, 15 years from now, we can say, they laid the foundation, and they laid a strong foundation to have an anchor come in. And Doni, why this is important is because it's adjacent to so many communities. It's adjacent to Chum, so it's going to have an indirect impact on them. South Clifton Park is adjacent to it. The 4x4 is adjacent to it, and Bel Air Edison is adjacent to it. So when we think about all that economic activity that can come from that anchor and how it indirectly impacts, I don't know how I forgot Dolly Park is also right next to it. So when you think about all those communities that's indirected by that anchor and the decision that was made from that standpoint, that's going to be a great thing. We talked about the stadium that'll be named after Robert L. Dalton. Chum is a new community in our footprint. We've been working with them. Mark Washington will be able to think about, like, the Tivoli piece of it. But this year we got in the budget to where he can start working on some of them larger houses on the Hoffer Road, so they can complement the stuff that you can't see from Hoffer Road that's on Tivoli, Gorsuch, and things of that nature. Over on the Bel Air Road corridor in the 4x4, we have a community that has 700 homes on 4 streets: Lindale, Elmora, Ravenwood, and Emily. Doni, they didn't have a plan. So what we did was we brought in 3 nonprofit developers, because they had a couple hundred vacancies only on these 4 streets. And we dumped about $2.5 million to subsidize affordable housing, built with intention, creating home ownership. And now we're doing what we're supposed to be doing in that community. We've been working on that for 3 years, Doni, 3 years just to set the blueprint. And now we're starting to finally get some fruit from the work that we've been able to lay. And now we've been acquiring those houses through the court process. We're now moving over into Dolly Park to be able to complement the new school that was built, but look at all the vacancy within that footprint and bring in with Department of Housing, Alice Kennedy and them. And we set up a fund in our budget, in the state budget, called the East Baltimore Development Fund. And this is how you can be intentional. That East Baltimore Development Fund can only be used for 4 communities that have that high vacancy and concentration of vacant homes: Dolly Park, Berea, 4x4, and South Clifton Park. Doni, we can't solve everything at one time, but we can be very intentional about getting it done and then moving intentionally into that next community. Let's talk about, as we go down, we talked about Dana and Dan Henson with the supermarket that we're going to be doing from that standpoint. We talked about making sure that we protect Mac Lewis. from that standpoint. When we go down to Johnson Square, we've dumped a ton of money in Johnson Square from the Henrietta Lacks Park. We've contributed to that. But in the more recent budget, we've been able to do teacher housing. We want to do like the young teachers, promote them to come in, promote them to stay, and they can have a communal space. So in the 400 block of Biddle, you'll see those houses coming down, but we're also creating a space that we're creating a theme for teachers to be able to come and have like a communal space. So the state budget also helped that. Across from that, you'll see St. Francis, one of the oldest African-American educational institutions from that standpoint, but they also wanted to do a football field. And I felt so happy, Donnie, when I drove on Biddle Street and I saw those young players out there practicing. So you see the green space that's been created. You see it fenced off, but we're working our way, and we gave them $500,000. We're going to continue to give them more so that they can do a stadium, because they're doing, Dr. Turner and them are doing phenomenal work over at that institution. I just wanted to kind of clearly try my best to articulate some of the things. And I ain't going to forget Dr. Martin. Let me lean back in with Dr. Martin. So every year that I have been in the Senate, we've contributed to the growth of the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, because it's our responsibility to protect that institution.
And they were neglected for so long.
And she's been neglected. But every year that I've been in there, and she's received, my first year they got $250,000, the second year they got $750,000, the third year they got $2 million, the fourth year they got $1 million, and the fifth year they got another $1 million. So there's been over a $5 million appropriation to the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, and making sure that that greater vision that she has for that North Avenue corridor, that she knows that the state of Maryland is partners within that piece of it. And that's been able to shake loose some extra money from the city. That's been able to shake loose Congressman Mfume just gave them another $2 million from a federal appropriation from that piece of it. But we're doing what we're supposed to do by that institution so that everybody recognizes the national treasure that it is. Donnie, I just wanted to kind of lay down some context and some of the groundwork. We're doing these small projects where we're doing parks or playgrounds and things of that nature. But I just wanted to lean in and talk about some of the bigger things that we're doing. The Bernard Harris community, from that standpoint, we wrestled with them trying to close out school a couple years ago. But for the last couple years, you'll see that Bernard Harris has been in the budget in a small type of way, because we want to let the community know we do care. We do see you. We're working on the larger piece of it, but the smaller things are things that we can deliver right now, and we're going to make sure we do that and continue to do that.
Well, I just want to say that the people you give money to, be it the academic institutions, the community groups, the museums, and so on and so forth, we have a responsibility to do what we're supposed to do when the money comes.
Amen.
Now, Morgan's been getting money for a long time, but I'm a student at Morgan, and I see where that customer service, somebody need to tighten up on that backstroke.
That's another thing is a lot of times too, what you'll find.
Accountability.
Yep. So what you'll find too is that you can do things in the budget, you can pass legislation, but the most important thing that we can do is implementation. So whenever we're appropriating, we're walking folks through the door to make sure that they understand how DGS works, to make sure that they understand how the Board of Public Works work. Because what happens is sometimes they get in these stuck places. And I won't name names, but sometimes folks are scared. Sometimes they're intimidated to be able to know, like, no, you can call on me. My job is to serve and make sure that we're spending this money. Don't spend the money 7 years from now. We need that money spent this year, next year, or within that 3-year period, and help me help you to be able to elevate that piece. We did have a question in reference to Nathan Irby. I just wanted to say that he's doing well. Let's remember that he's 90 plus years old. Senator Irby is 90 plus years old. Every time he called, I answer from that standpoint, but he is doing well. I talked to him, I want to say about 2-3 weeks ago.
Well, my last question to you is, any thoughts on state senator? My final question, and thank you. And I thought we were fair. I thought we were decent. I think we covered a lot of ground, and you're certainly one of the most articulate politicians in the state of Maryland from our community. But on that note, two of the smartest people besides Senator McFadden and Tiger Davis that I know in Annapolis prior to you was Dolores G. Kelly and Joan Carter Conway.
Yep.
Any thoughts on those two legends?
Now I look at them like my aunts, man, and to be honest with you, like they've always been great mentors. Both of them have been great mentors to me. I've known Senator Conway before I'd even got into politics from that standpoint. So I've been blessed by her mentorship when I was in the House of Delegates. I was really looking forward to serving with her and when I was in the Senate, because I looked at her like a boss.
She punched Mike Miller right in his mouth.
But she stood up for our issues unapologetically on a number of occasions. When I saw other folks did not stand with her, she would be standing, and I deeply appreciated that piece of it. I'm gonna move over to Senator Kelly and Chairwoman Kelly. Chairwoman Kelly was so special in such a special way because she wrapped young Black men, her arms around them, and mentored us, whether it was Sidnor, whether it was Augustine, whether it was Hayes, and she let us know that we belong. She let us know that we are smart. She let us know that she was one of, even when she left, she was one of the hardest workers that you would see from a bill standpoint, intentionality standpoint, and just making sure that she stand up from that piece of it. So I'm thankful that I'm blessed to be able to have the friendship, the mentorship, and that they're both still here and I can call on them for guidance and counsel.
Well, I'm going to leave you with the words of Malcolm X. I'd rather be who I am, a Black man, than to claim membership with the most favored of any other race. I've been made sad when members of this or that particular race start claiming rights and privileges or certain badges of distinctions on the grounds that they belong to this or that particular race, regardless of their own individual worth or attainment. Merit is in the long run recognized and rewarded. I say that here not to call attention to myself as an individual, but to the race to which I am proud to belong. We are proud of you, Senator McCray.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Appreciate you, my friend. I'm blessed.
Yes, sir.